Welcome. Over the next few minutes, I want to share with you some thoughts about systems thinking. Historically, we have typically sought to understand things through a process of analysis. We take things apart and we study the parts and attempt to understand the whole from an understanding of the parts. The difficulty that we run into is that analysis is, in fact, unable to answer why questions about things. You can study the pieces of a clock forever and never understand why a minute is as long as it is. And we have repeatedly found out that systems think or that analysis simply is not up to the task at hand when it comes to complex situations. So the concept of systems thinking has evolved over the last 50 to 60 years. And an understanding of what systems thinking is actually founded on an understanding of what a system is. A system being an entity that maintains its existence through the mutual interaction of its parts. And that mutual interaction is a key in that it is in fact each of the parts interacting together that cause something to be what it is, and that there is a boundary around it that we establish to define what we mean when we refer to the system, and it interacts with its environment. And from that interaction emerges a set of characteristics so that when we look at things, we look at them rather than seeing events, we begin to think about the patterns of behavior that unfold associated with those events and the underlying structures that are responsible for that pattern of behavior and the mental models that are actually responsible for the creation of the structures that cause the patterns of behavior. So what we come to understand is that we need to do analysis and synthesis in that it's appropriate to understand the elements of a system and the nature of their interaction, though we also need to understand the nature of that system and its interaction with the larger context of its environment so that we understand both the how and the why of the interactions. So this provides a sense of what goes into the basis for systems thinking, though Ludwig von Bertalanffy, who is considered by most to be the father of modern systems theory, considered systems thinking to be a worldview, and Senge in the fifth discipline referred to it as a discipline. The question is, how does one go about doing systems thinking? Is that in fact, how do you do a discipline or how do you do a worldview? There has been a lot of work over the years identifying a set of habits that are appropriate to someone who is a systems thinker, in that they look at the big picture and they think about the interactions and they find the keys to how the system fits together, and they look at the implications of things. So and these are in fact valid habits for one to perform, though how does one go about doing this in some orderly fashion to produce a result that is in fact repeatable? And this is a marvelous diagram that came from the Waters Foundation System Thinking in Schools project, and it's a great reminder about different habits that one should in fact perform. This diagram is also a marvelous diagram in that it talks about different aspects that are relevant in that you want to do creative thinking and scientific thinking and nonlinear thinking and a whole bunch of various aspects or dimensions of those viewpoints. Though when you get down to it, the real essence is that for a given situation, we really want to develop an understanding sufficient to allow us to create a strategy which, when adopted, will improve the situation, though improve the situation at the same time that it minimizes the potential for unintended consequences, because unintended consequences, in fact, tend to make the situation worse or create more problems, new problems that we just have to deal with in the future. And it's been repeatedly said that that because of the complicated nature of things and the separation between cause and effects over both distance and time most of the time, that the current problems that we deal with today are for the most part the result of yesterday's solutions. So from a systems thinking perspective, the concept of systems thinking has evolved over the years, where I said von Bertalanffy was the father of modern systems theory, that there were a number of methods or models and approaches that were developed in the 30s and 40s, and that evolved into an approach for doing systems thinking. Though what happened was, found out that the approaches were unable to deal with certain types of situations. So it's necessity being the mother of invention on an ongoing basis. So what happens is Checkland developed an approach called soft systems methodology, and Beer developed organizational cybernetics, and Ulrich, Ackoff, and Churchman developed emancipatory systems thinking, which evolved over time into today something referred to as critical systems thinking, which is in fact encompassing all of the methods of the past, though in a manner appropriate to the context of the situation at hand. So from the work of Michael Jackson, looking at the situation from two dimensions, one being the system, whether the system itself is a simple system, one that you can imagine was in fact designed and constructed, or a complex system, one that simply evolved over time, and the best one can hope to do is understand it, but could never have actually designed it. And the other dimension from that of the participants, in terms of the extent to which the participants are aligned in terms of their goals and beliefs and intentions, whether or not the participants are well aligned, whether they are somewhat aligned and may come together for the context of a particular situation, though they're not completely aligned, or whether or not the stakeholders or participants are in fact coercive, and are not likely to agree or come together about anything for any reason. So that based upon those two dimensions, you end up with a number of different systems thinking approaches: hard systems thinking for unitary simple, and dynamic systems thinking for unitary complex, and soft systems thinking in this realm, and emancipatory here and postmodern here. So you in fact are doing critical systems thinking by considering the context and understanding what's appropriate for the context, what is likely to provide the greatest benefit in that arena. And that all gets wrapped up in an approach to developing a systemic perspective, where starting back here with this systems thinking iceberg view of what is leveled on top of what else, you begin with a situation, you understand the patterns of behavior associated with that situation over time, you understand the set of interactions that are responsible for that behavior, you establish a boundary to identify who the stakeholders are, what things they're responsible for, what identifies or entails the system to be addressed, and what's part of the environment. And the stakeholders then understand that situation, look at and understand the assumptions that they've made in terms of understanding that situation, challenge them to ensure that they do have a valid understanding of the situation. And then they look for the leverage points which will in fact alter that network of interactions in such a way that it will relieve the situation, so that set of leverage points is actually come together to create a strategy that is then adopted by the stakeholders, which improves the network of interactions to produce a different tomorrow than today, so that the situation is in fact not simply eliminated, it's simply dissolved, because there is no more basis for the situation as it exists, because the interactions responsible for it have been changed. And it is in fact a strategy which minimizes the unintended consequences, so that its adoption of the strategy isn't likely to make the situation worse or create new problems that have to be dealt with in the future. So from a basic definition of what a system is to a set of habits that are employed by systems thinkers to a framework for doing systems thinking in a context appropriate manner with a repeatable process that the stakeholders can in fact pursue. Hopefully this gives you a sense of where I believe systems thinking is today. See you in the next video.